Okay. Tonight, we're going to be looking at Krishnamurti, and I'm going to be reading a little bit from the book called To Be Human. To Be Human. Now, the title of this short article or essay, the title is One's Uniqueness as a Human Being Lies in Complete Freedom from the Content of One's Consciousness. The content of one's consciousness, he's referring to the me. To the me. And this is what he says. The question is, can the content of consciousness, which makes up consciousness as we know it, be completely emptied? The whole inward content of consciousness is what it has thought, what it has accumulated, what it has received through tradition, culture, struggle, pain, sorrow, deception. Within that area are all my conscious or unconscious thoughts. And any movement within that area is within the movement of consciousness with its content. Therefore, space in this consciousness with its content is very limited, right? Of course, if it's filled with thoughts, if it's filled with images, if it's filled with memories, how much space can there be? So any movement to go beyond itself is still within the content. That's why when you take drugs of any kind, LSD, marijuana, opium, and so forth, it is still the activity of thought within that consciousness. And when you think you're going beyond it, you are still within it. It is only an idea, or you experience more deeply the content. So one has to see that however expanded, space in the content, which is the me, the ego, the person, the so-called individual, within that consciousness must always be limited. So to consciously make an effort to reach something beyond itself invites illusion, right? So he's clearly saying here, if the content of my consciousness is fundamentally thought, then it is thought that's trying to go beyond itself. It's thought that's trying to know the unknown, the unnameable, God or the absolute. Can the mind see its own limitation? And the very perception of that limitation is the ending of that limitation. Not how to empty the mind, but to see the content that makes up consciousness, to see that totally, and to perceive, to listen to all the movement of that consciousness. And the very perception of it is the ending of it, not how to end it. If I see something false, the very perception of the false is the true. The very perception of my telling a lie is the truth. The very perception of my envy is the freedom from envy, is the truth. That is, you can see very clearly, observe very clearly, only when there is no observer. The observer, the me, being the past, the image, the conclusion, the opinion, the judgment. So can the mind see clearly, without any effort, its contents and the limitations of it, which means the lack of space and the time-binding quality of consciousness with its content, the time-binding quality, right? Because in this consciousness, in this awareness of the me, you see that it's fundamentally based on thought. And thought is time, isn't it? Thought is the past, thought is the future. And that's where the mind is going. Past, through the present to the future. Only when you can look silently, when the observer is totally silent, that is, if I want to see you, my vision mustn't be blurred. I must have very good eyesight to see the whole outline of you, the hair, the bone structure of your face, and so on. I must look very clearly. That means there must be attention. And in that attention, there is energy. Whereas when you make an effort to be attentive, that effort is a wastage of energy. When you try to control, that is a wastage of energy. Control implies conformity, comparison, suppression, and all that is a wastage of energy. When there is perception, direct perception, there is attention, which is total energy, in which there's not a breath of wastage of energy. So like everything else in life, we have divided consciousness into the conscious and the unconscious, like the artist and the businessman. This division, this fragmentation exists, induced by our culture, by our education. And you are asking a question, which is, there is this division between conscious and unconscious. And the unconscious has its motives, its racial inheritance, its experience, and so on. How can all that be exposed to the light of intelligence, to the light of perception? If you are saying, I honestly, seriously don't know how to expose this whole hidden structure of consciousness, I really don't know. Then when you approach it not knowing, you're going to learn. But if you have any kind of conclusion, opinion, for or against, that cannot be or that can be, then you are approaching it with a mind that has already assumed the answer or no answer. Therefore, when the mind says, I don't know, that is the truth. That is honesty. When you say, I do not know, the content has no importance whatsoever. the content has no importance whatsoever. You know, it's interesting. When there is awareness of the movement of thought, when there's awareness of how it moves, how it jumps, how it projects into the future, how it's dwelling onto the past, when there is an awareness of all that, if you don't get hung up in the content, but just watch the process of how thought works, it's easier to interrupt it. If you get hung up in the content, I shouldn't have done this, I shouldn't have said that, maybe I'll do this thing, maybe I'll do that thing. If you get hung up in the content, whatever the content is, fear or jealousy or worry, or you're losing the process of thought. And that makes it more difficult to allow the content to be emptied. Because now you've honed in, you've anchored in. So I'll just continue to what he says.
Instead of saying process, you could also say the pattern or the movement.
Fine, yes. The pattern or the movement. Right. If you watch that, it's really an interesting experiment. If you can watch that, especially if you're able to, if you're locked into fear, and you're able to step out enough so that you can watch how those thoughts are moving. Because what is the root of fear? It's the movement of thought. You know, no movement of thought, no fear. So the mind can never say it knows. Therefore, it is always new, living, acting, and therefore it has no anchorage. It is only when it is anchored that it gathers opinions and conclusions and separation. Now, this is meditation, which is, meditation is to perceive the truth every second, not the truth ultimately, to perceive the true and the false each second, to perceive the truth that the content is consciousness, to see the truth that I do not know how to deal with this thing. That is the truth, the not knowing. Therefore, not knowing is the state in which there is no content, right? If you say, I don't know, then it's just an open space. So can the mind, which is the brain, see its own limitation, which is the bondage of time and the limitation of space? I'm going to read that again. Can the mind, which is the brain, see its own limitation, which is the bondage of time and the limitation of space? Right? That's what the me is made up of. It's in bondage in time. And it's in the limitation. Well, actually, it feels like it's not limited at all, but it is. It's limited in space because there is no space. There's very little space when the mind is flooded with all these thoughts and moving back and forth and jumping all around. And as long as one lives within that limited space and time-binding movement, there must be suffering. There must be psychological despair, hope, and anxiety, all that. So when the mind has perceived the truth of this, then what is time? Is there then a different dimension? Is there then a different dimension which thought cannot touch, therefore cannot describe? We have said thought is measure and therefore time. We live by measurement. All our structure of thinking is based on measurement, which is comparison, evaluation, becoming. And thought as measurement tries to go beyond itself and discover for itself if there is something immeasurable. And to see the falseness of that is the truth. The truth is to see the false. And the false is when thought seeks that which is not measurable, which is not of time, which is not of that limited space, which is the content of consciousness. So now I read this, but I have to tell you, I did skip around. If you get the book, you can read, but I skipped very little. So, but you can read it in its exact entirety. So well, first of all, any questions, any comment? What does it say to you, these words? What does it point to for you? Does it point to anything? It may not, I don't know. Let me just reread a few sentences. Yeah.
Well, I was thinking, you know, today we witnessed one of the latest, greatest triumphs of thought. The Paradise rover landed on the surface of Mars, exactly where they intended it to go. And this rover is like 5 times the size of the rover that was placed on the moon. It weighs several tons, maybe 4 or 5 tons. So getting it to land was just a major feat, and a testimony to human intelligence, which is the epitome of right thought and action. And on the other hand, we know how miserable thought can make us all in our daily life when we're not really watching where we choose to place our attention. So it's right. a good reminder of the old adage that thought is a great servant, but a poor master. And I think that's what echoes through Krishnamurti's words for me.
Yes, yes. Yes, you know, when he says thought, psychological thought, see, he's not talking about the thought that has to do with technology. He's not talking about the thought right. which has to do with skill, with learning a language or learning how to use the computer. He's not talking about that. He's talking about psychological thoughts. When he talks of time, he's not talking about chronological time. I've got to know what time it is so that I can go to work. He's talking about psychological time, which is where we live, in either the past or the future. That's what he's talking about. And so when he says that that psychological thought is what's trying to find God, trying to see God, trying to know the absolute, it's a concept. It's another image. That thought can't know that which is beyond thought. That thought which lives in time cannot know that which is beyond time, which is, as he said, immeasurable. And you know, last week when we read from Jean Klein, remember, Jean said, you cannot find God. Why? Because it's not an object to be found. And psychological thought wants to find an object, and it can never find an object. God is not an object, or the absolute is not an object. It's the ultimate subject, which is fundamentally what you are. But let me, I think this is important. Not how to empty the mind, but you know, when you say, I wish I could be free of this me. I want to just empty this me so I can know the silent mind, right? So maybe if there's if the mind is truly silent, not forced to be silent, not manipulated to be silent, but is silent because it's empty, maybe there'll be a realization of that which is beyond the mind. So he's saying, so it's not about how to empty this mind, this me, but to see the content that makes up that consciousness of the me. And you know, he said the envy, the jealousy, the fears, the worry. To see that totally and to perceive, to listen to all the movement of that consciousness. And the very perception of it is the ending of it, not how to end it. And as Krishnamurti has said in the past, the seeing is the doing. If I see something false, the very perception of the false is the true. If I see, and the very perception, if I see something false, the very perception of the false is the true. The very perception of my telling a lie is the truth. The very perception of my envy is the freedom from envy, is the truth. That is, you can see very clearly, observe very clearly only when there is no observer. The observer being the past, the image, the conclusion, the opinion, the judgment.
So is he saying that the seeing is done without the I, not through the me?
Absolutely. Absolutely. If it's done through the me, then it's the me just seeing itself.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Right.
The me is the envy. So if the me sees the envy.
Well, because I mean, just seeing, I mean, if you're seeing through the me, through the I, through the center, it's conditioned, it's prejudiced, it's judgmental, it's
right.
It can't see truth, right? Is that, I mean,
Right.
as far as the psychological end of things are concerned.
No, it can't.
Right.
It cannot. So there has to
That's
be.
why I think it's really, why Krishnamurti, I think, is really, I mean, if you want to get this stuff, boy, there's a trove, a treasure there, because he really gets into the mechanics of how this thing, it's not a miracle, you know, it's not something where you go and throw water at a rock or swallow some yellow or white tablets and things will happen, you know, and all kinds of things. I mean, at least I accept his explanation of the whole process of how this consciousness is put together from birth. It starts when you pop out of the womb. Maybe some of it's going on in the womb. But the thing we call the brain starts recording all of your experiences. And there's a point at which, as you start recording all of this stuff, that you're taught what to do with it, how to handle those experiences. You know, maybe you're taught to cry when you're angry, or you're taught to hold it in, or you're taught to hate black people or yellow people, or you're taught to hate Jews, or you're taught to hate Italians. You know, you're taught all kinds of things. Maybe you're taught to like vanilla instead of chocolate, all kinds of things, and that goes, and that conditions how you start using those that memory process that we call thought. And to me, that's really, without that understanding, none of this stuff can make sense. That's why I think Krishnamurti he's beautiful, because with that thinking, with the thinking is done by the ego. It's done by the me. That's the thing that's thinking. And if you get an understanding of what the ego is, what the me is, what the center is, then you're going to question a great deal of what comes out of that thinking. And I mean, as far as the witnessing is concerned, all day long we're talking to, the me is talking. There's the chatter, and then to a greater or lesser extent, when there's some pain issues or some hurt issues involved, that's what's doing the hurting and the and causing you to feel that way. And what my experience has been is, the more I can make myself aware of that and catch myself into it, the less of an effect it has. You know, just today I went to get some medication, and there was a bit of a problem there, and I just talked myself. I was amazed because I was watching myself not get excited. I was waiting for myself to get excited, you know, and pull a Paula, you know, and I didn't do it, and it was calm, and I was surprised. Everything went rather well, and it happens more and more often, and I think a lot of it is attributed to all of you people helping me, and the readings, specifically Krishnamurti.
Good, Ugo.
So Evie and Paul, when experiencing, you know, an emotion very strongly, whether it's anger or shame or jealousy or whatever, according to Krishnamurti's teachings, it's enough to see that. It's enough just to see the feeling, experience the emotion. Then you're just into the sort of biological experience of the emotion, and you're not into the suffering, which is, you know, the pain of the pain, or the pain of the second arrow. Right. Is that how you interpret this?
I do think so, yes. Yes, to see the whole thing. So see the emotion in the body, because it's usually always someplace in the body. Sometimes it even begins in the body before you're even aware of it.
Yep.
To see the whole thing, to see it in the body, to see it in the thoughts as they move. You see, at that moment of fear, there really is no separation. There's just fear.
Yep.
But a second later, there is an awareness of the knot in the stomach, or you're projecting something into the future. There's an awareness of all that. And yes, at that moment, to be able to see, this is what's going on, this is what's moving. And that which is moving is me.
Right.
It's not separate from me. That
Well,
fear is me.
I notice also that during some of these really absorptive emotions, I don't want to let go of them. You know, I'm too busy defining myself by this state of this emotion that I'm experiencing. And it takes a real will, a real awareness to let it go and say, okay, now you're just into attachment to the feeling. Let that go as well. Let it all go.
Yes, that's right. That's right. Let it go. But yes, and it's easier, or it's easy in a way to let it go when there is a direct perception that I'm holding on to it,
Yep.
that I'm nursing it, that it's serving me some kind of purpose. When there's an insight into that, then how can I keep holding it? I mean, I guess I could keep holding it, but why would I? As soon as there was an insight into what was really going on in that moment. Because the idea is, I don't want to suffer.
Right.
Don't want to suffer, especially psychologically. There's nothing we can do if we're caught like those poor people in Texas that are freezing. There's not much we can do if by nature we're caught in some kind of a catastrophe. But to suffer psychologically, I don't want to suffer. Suffering must end. Just like cruelty must end.
There's a fine line there too. Something can happen that can make you very sad, and it's appropriate to feel that sadness. That's human. And so it's not like, okay, I feel sadness. Okay, I'm done with it. I'm going on to be enlightened again. I think maybe it's rushing things.
Yes.
Being human works.
Yes. Well, with some feelings that appear, you do have to sit with.
I guess if the sadness is related to the suffering of others, it's one thing. But if the sadness is related to my own suffering, it's another.
Well,
you know, the sadness, the sorrow of the suffering of others is, yes, it's my humanity, my shared feeling of oneness to see another suffer. But when I'm suffering about myself, it's usually more self-centered.
yeah.
Sadness about my own plight, as opposed to seeing a sadness of someone else having a real sorrowful situation. If you're not moved by sorrow for others' suffering, then we're in trouble.
Yeah.
Well, there's also there's another aspect, I think, that I see in myself. There's quite a bit of difference, which I'm beginning to understand more and more, between suffering now, something is happening, and I'm saddened, or I'm angered, or I'm emotionally moved by the situation in the present. It's happening now. Whereas, you know, you're in bed or something and I'm thinking about something that happened 25, 30, 40 years ago. In fact, that happened this morning when I was in bed. I shot back to days of Seacliff and an incident there, and I found myself getting all riled up. And then I thought about it. I said, well, that's pretty good. Now, what else are you going to do for an encore here? You're using thought to get upset. And I mean, you can see it. You can actually see it. This is what's happening. So with that awareness, it takes the edge off of it. It just takes the edge off of it, and it just goes away, and then you go on to something else.
Well, Ugo, as soon as you see the story, you're outside it.
Yep.
right? As soon as you recognize that you're lost in a narrative or a story, suddenly you're outside it rather than just being carried along with the drama.
Well, it takes me a little while to get outside of it because I can still feel my ego trying to get in here and say, I'm going to get back and take care of that guy. I'm still upset about it. And I can feel that, I can feel the conditioning, Hugo. I can feel Hugo really getting upset about something that happened 30 years ago that you can't possibly do anything about. And I think it's when I finally get to the understanding, you can't do anything about what happened. It's in the past, like you can do it in the future. You can't do anything. I think then that like he says, that kind of quiets my mind a little bit. I mean, you got to give up. I mean, you want to jump over that creek, but the creek is 14 feet wide. You ain't going to make it. So you either walk through it or decide to stay on this side of the creek.
Karen wants to say something. Go ahead.
I have a question. This morning, I don't know, early, I woke up with anxiety. Now, I wasn't aware of thinking anything. In fact, Rob, you didn't say anything. Anyway, but I could feel it in my body. I mean, I could just feel it. It was very visceral. So how did I handle it at that point? Because I was like, I'm not thinking of anything, though I probably could have found something. But I just knew that I had to get up. And then I mean, that's how I handled it. I got up and I did, just sat quietly. I actually did some Qigong that I do to kind of come into a different space within. And then then it wasn't an issue, but it was visceral, and I've had that before. And it's a terrible feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I don't, yeah. So,
Well, it was like a free-floating anxiety.
yeah.
And you couldn't attribute it to any specific thing.
No.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-mm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, but I know I couldn't watch my thought. My thoughts weren't involved in it at that point in time, and so. But I knew that if I stayed in bed, it wouldn't be a good thing, because then it would have food to feed, it would have feed on, And,
But don't you have to have thought to have anxiety?
Yes.
So without thought, you wouldn't have anxiety. So maybe when you were sleeping, and maybe you're in your subconscious, you had something going on that stirred you up.
or it was cellular memory. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm really thinking.
But I would think without thought, you have nothing to release and nothing to get you upset without thought. Like if you're in a state of meditation and you're just trying to be quiet, it's kind of hard to be anxious at that point because you're just sort of being. So there's an example of just without thought, just being at peace.
Mm. Mm.
It's funny. I like the way Krishnamurti uses a word like illusion and a word like lie, because I think most of us don't walk around thinking of ourselves as being liars. But then in some situations, we can look back on a situation and realize that through speaking and behavior, we were portraying ourselves in a way that was designed to elicit a certain response from someone else.
Mm-hmm.
and that self that we were holding forth was false, if
Yes.
we look at it.
Yes.
And I
Right.
really think that a thought moves so fast
Mm.
that it can be over the fence and you don't know it went over the fence,
Mhm.
and the anxiety begins to rise. But you're not in your mind has no grasp on the thought that went over the fence. It's gone.
Mm-hmm.
But it leaves in its wake this explosion of anxiety, and that can be so consuming that it's impossible to track down a thought. You can then remedy that feeling of anxiety, but that doesn't, and that's useful to live.
Yeah.
It's very useful in a practical sense. But the mechanics are still there for another thought to go over the fence and create a sense of depression.
Yes.
So it's like you're saying that a fleeting thought can leave you with a reservoir of fear or anger.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it comes back to the idea. I won't call it a reality, but the idea that it's very important, and I think this is what Krishnamurti is trying to get across to us, the idea of the importance of maintaining
Robert, we lost you.
Oh, okay. I thought it
Can't
was
hear
me.
you. We can't hear you.
After maintaining.
awareness.
After maintaining,
How?
after maintaining a thought. Go on with that.
No, it's not a matter of maintaining a thought, but maintaining an awareness of the mechanics of thought and how thought operates. And it's no easy trick, obviously, or we wouldn't need someone like Krishnamurti. But it's, I think the biggest lie I ever tell personally is when I'm trying to present myself as something I'm not.
Mm-hmm. Mm.
And I very often, in the midst of doing that, I'm not being insincere. It's only in the aftermath when something starts niggling at me
Mm-hmm.
that if I look back, and the sooner I look back, the fresher it is,
Mm-hmm.
that I can see in the dynamics of the relationship between me and an other person. I can see where the impulse came from. And to see that is, in that instance, to be free of it with the awareness that it's going to come back.
Mm.
Because you can't stop thought. I can't stop thought.
Mm. Right.
And
Right.
it's like lighting a fire to try to put out a fire.
Right. Right.
It ain't going to work.
Can I
That's
say something, Evelyn?
yes.
But-
Oh, I'm
but
sorry. Yeah.
This specific use of words like lie and illusion are very powerful.
Well, Chet.
Yeah, I think you're onto something, the illusion or lie. And so what's the lie? The lie is that you're an ego. And when you're saying it's going to come back, you're talking about your ego is going to reassert itself. So Karin, when you're having those anxious feelings, right, what's present there in that scenario? What are the components? One is the component of thought, but the other is the component of the ego. right? So you have other times where you have thoughts and you feel very peaceful and it's fine. And what's present there? There is no ego at that point. You're having the experience of thought, or you're having beingness, or whatever you want to call it. So the lie is the ego, and that's the lie we tell ourselves. And that's the lie that we need to look beyond, to recognize that even though we assert at times that we're this egoic self, that's the lie. So when you're having trouble with your thinking, you can recognize that you're in an egoic state. And it's that simple. If you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling troubled, you're in an egoic state, and that's the lie.
Oh, I like that.
And this idea about it having to be reassert itself, or it having to come back, that's a lie that your ego tells itself. And that you believe. And because you believe it, it allows it to happen. Rather than, what we can simply do is we can recognize that when we're in a state of anxiety, a state of fear, that egoic identity has reasserted itself, and we are aligning ourselves with that. And that's it. So there's lots of techniques or things. I'm sure you've learned lots of them. Breathing, all these things. What's the purpose of those? The purpose of those is to reorient your mind to something else, so that you can relinquish your egoic identification. You can relinquish that lock, that connection you've made to your ego.
Yes.
Great, thanks. That's all I wanted to say.
Thank you.
Right.
That's very helpful.
Yes, very good point.
Can I say something?
Sure.
Or maybe it's sort of a question, because I also, maybe it was something in the stars, woke up early this morning with just a feeling of anxiety. And I'm very aware of the thought in the morning, if there's a thought that's causing it. And, but it seemed, like Karin said, cellular. And so I don't know. I mean, maybe sometimes there are thoughts that are below the level of consciousness, right? I mean, can they be causing that? And I mean, I like Karin's solution to just try and calm the body. And I mean, I tried to just sit with it for a while, because sometimes the thought will reveal itself, but nothing. It was just the pure physical. It felt very physical. Just curious.
Yes. So, yeah. Well, as Chip said, it's all the egoic state. I think what we tend to do, because we're so identified with it, is to try and escape from it. And we may need to do that just to calm down, like to get up, to walk around, to have a drink of water, to breathe, whatever we do. The thing is to have a realization that that is what we're doing. And what if we didn't run away? What if we were able to really stay and just look, just to look at what's going on, whether it's in the body, whether it's the thoughts, to see, are we stuck in the time bondage? Just to stay with it, if we can. Is it then more likely that we've emptied something? Is it then more likely that if and when this does happen again, that now we've learned something, and so we can better observe without the me, obviously, because now we've emptied the me, and we keep emptying. And the only way we can empty it, and I agree with what Kay says here, is by seeing it. The seeing is the doing. And to just see and be careful not to put concepts into it, really even to be careful not even to label it. I think Kay would go a step further and say, don't even label it a me. Just see what's happening here, that whole movement, that whole process that's going on. I think we can all do this. Really, if we don't shut the mind by saying this is hard, if we leave the mind open, I think I know that we can do this. And maybe that's the meditation he's talking about. Remember, he said here, the meditation is second by second. Second by second. Just to see, without analyzing anything. And certainly without any kind of judgment about your own being, which we tend to do when we look back in time at a situation and we say, oh, why did I ever say that? Or why did I ever do that? Now we're back in time. And not only that, we're beating ourselves up. I want to just read one paragraph. Choiceless awareness, this is K, implies to be aware, both objectively outside and inwardly, without any choice, just to be aware of the colors of this tent, of the trees, the mountains, nature, just to be aware. Not to choose, say, I like this, I don't like that, or I want this, I don't want that. To observe without the observer. The observer is the past, who is conditioned. Therefore, he's always looking from that conditioned point of view. So there is like and dislike. My race, my God, your God, and all the rest of it. We are saying to be aware implies to observe the whole environment around you, the mountains, the trees, the ugly wars, the towns, to be aware, to look at it. And in that observation, there is no decision, no will, no choice. To look without any choice. Choiceless awareness. Choiceless awareness. And it's interesting. That's how we look outside, and that's how we look inside. And then we come to see it's one movement.
You're looking without the me.
That's right. That's right.
So then you're seeing what is. That's
right. That's right.
And that's the only way that you can see what is.
That's right.
So whenever the editing machine and there's a little reels going around in here and you're editorializing, the censor is viewing what's being, or is critiquing what's being experienced, whether it's seeing, hearing, or whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not seeing what is, and it's not choiceless awareness.
Right.
It's awareness of the I, not of what's there.
Correct.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
That's right.
Heavy. In the readings I've done on non-duality, it's always emphasized that we cannot fix anyone else, right? We can't fix anyone else's problems. I asked them the same of myself. Can I fix my own problems? And it seems I spend time doing this, sometimes in a rational way, sometimes in an irrational, perfectionistic way. But I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on self-improvement?
No.
I mean, Joan Tollefson wrote a book, just came out, called Death, The End of Self-Improvement, which I love the title of.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
your thoughts?
Well, the death of the me. If there's the death of the me, that's all the self-improvement you need. You don't need anything else.
You're not trying to improve the self. You're trying to sort of make it go away. If you're trying to improve the self, every time you do that, you're adding to the thing that you want to, you know, not add to, if you will.
Exactly. Exactly.
Who is the I and who is myself?
What do you mean?
I have to fix myself. There's a duality right then and there. Eckhart Tolle says that's what opened the door to his breakthrough, that he was suffering with depression for years. And one morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, when he was contemplating suicide, he kept repeating to himself, I can't stand myself. I can't stand myself, until suddenly he said, wait a minute. There can't be two of me. Which one is real? There can't be an I and myself. And that broke him through to a new awareness.
Wow.
Well, let's all ponder on that for the week. So have a wonderful week.
Thank you. Thank you all for
Thank
coming.
you.
Love
Yeah.
you. Love you.
Bye-bye now. Stay
Thank
safe.
you so much.
Bye, Christine.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Mwah.
Bye.
Bye.
Buonanotte tutti.
Buonanotte.
Bye.